Is our final lesson in the Faith and Politics series, and we want today to kind of offer a summary and a conclusion and provide a biblical approach to politics. And we want to begin that class by reminding us of the foundation of our faith. The definitive confession of the Christian is that Jesus is Lord. That was the announcement in the very first gospel sermon. Peter announces this: "Therefore, let all Israel be assured of this: God has made this Jesus, whom you crucified, both Lord and Messiah." Paul, in one of his letters, will continue that announcement of Jesus as Lord. He will write to the church in Corinth, "Yet for us there is but one God, the Father, from whom all things came and for whom we live. And there is one Lord, Jesus Christ, through whom all things came and through whom we live." And then we have that statement in the book of Romans, that great announcement: if you declare with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. Paul affirms, in fact, this passage that he affirms that it was read by Judai this morning. Paul affirms that there will come a time when the lordship of Jesus will be apparent and undeniable to all. You know that passage. "Therefore God exalted him to the highest place and gave him the name that is above every name, that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue acknowledge that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father." This announcement that Jesus is Lord is not just a designation of his identity. It is an acknowledgement of his position in our lives and our relationship to him. Jesus rules and reigns in the hearts of those who follow him. We live as citizens of his kingdom to bring honor and praise to the one who died for us, for all humanity. The meaning of the lordship of Jesus is clearly defined in Paul's second letter to the Corinthians. He writes, "And he died for all, that those who live should no longer live for themselves, but for him who died for them and was raised again." And the all-encompassing nature of this lordship is clearly stated by Paul in Romans 14. "For none of us lives for ourselves alone, and none of us dies for ourselves alone. We live for the Lord. And if we die for the Lord. So whether we live or die, we belong to the Lord." Jesus' lordship extends into every areas of our lives. It continues even through death. And if Jesus is Lord, then he is Lord of every area of life, including the political. God is the Lord of the ballot box and of the halls of Congress, as well as of private lives and families and churches. The gospel is adequately honored only when we insist that it renews and redeems all aspects of life, both public and private. So if we are called to honor Jesus in our political choices, then what does that mean? How will a biblical approach to politics display itself in the way we vote? In what specific ways might faith in Jesus influence the political agenda we pursue? That is the theme and the purpose of this concluding class. We want to begin with three statements, three helpful guides, which will guide us as we make our political choices. And the first guide is this: we must pursue issues over party. You know, it surprises some when they realize that there are committed Christians in both major political parties. That means that neither Republicans nor Democrats have a monopoly on righteousness and truth. Some Christians come to believe that the principles of political conservatism more accurately reflect the will of God, and that any who hold to liberal ideas are misled at best, or maybe evil at worst. On the other hand, there are liberal-minded Christians who announce that only the liberal perspective reflects the divinely ordained values of justice and mercy. Both assumptions are wrong. And they are wrong because there is value in both the conservative and the liberal position. Political conservatives have brought value to our nation. They've been advocates for the innocent and the unborn and have kept before us issues of right and wrong. They've helped preserve the best of our free enterprise system as it works for the common good. They have worked to ensure that non-sectarian religion remains a significant part of political and public discourse. All of those are good things. But likewise, political liberals have brought value to our nation. They led the campaign, gave women the right to vote, were the primary advocates for civil rights legislation. They've initiated a greater environmental awareness that has led to cleaner rivers and fresher air. They've brought greater cultural inclusion to the disabled. And they passed laws that broke down barriers that prevented their full participation of the disabled in society. What does this mean? This means that neither political party is always right and neither is always wrong. On some issues, the conservative position is good. The Christians will take the conservative position because it's right. And on other issues, their perspective may be more liberal. But it is the issue that must decide our perspective and not the boundaries of a political party. An unswerving and partisan allegiance can regrettably blind us to certain realities. We end up developing a bias that keeps us from recognizing the value of the other side. Okay, second helpful guide, respect over ridicule. The passion of party allegiance is much more pronounced today than it used to be. I'm thinking about 40 years, especially, I'm thinking 40 years ago. It's different. It's not just that Democrats and Republicans don't like each other. Sometimes it seems that members of opposing parties now view one another with disdain and even loathing. It wasn't always like this. In the 1970s, when Republicans and Democrats were asked their opinion of members of the opposite party, their descriptions were really kind of mild. People in the opposing party were described as uninformed or unrealistic or at worst just ignorant. Regrettably, descriptions of the opposing party are much more extreme today. It's not uncommon to hear Democrats announce that Republicans are inherently intolerant and racist, motivated by selfishness and greed. Republicans are quick to portray Democrats as violent anarchists, intent on bringing social upheaval, undermining the rule of law. Such inaccurate caricatures not only flagrantly wrong, they erect rigid barriers that make constructive dialogue almost impossible. There is a distinct counterpoint in the Christian response. It is not just in the political opinions we hold, it's also discerned in the way we talk about those opinions, in the way we talk about politics. The Christian participation in politics must express itself differently. The Apostle Paul's words about conversation What he writes in the book of in Ephesians is especially appropriate in this context. Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouth. We need to apply that to the idea of political discourse. Scripture instructs us to live at peace, but it's possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. The opposite of peace is fighting. Too often our conversations descend into power struggles. There is only one inherent purpose in a power struggle, and that is to dominate and win. And ridicule and derision of another's point of view are basically designed to better equip us to win so we can emerge victorious. Peter wrote the following instruction to Christians who are being persecuted. For it is God's will that by doing good, you will silence the ignorant talk of foolish people. Show proper respect to everyone. Love the family of believers. Fear God. Honor the emperor. If Christians are to treat their persecutors with respect, surely we can treat with respect those with whom we politically disagree. Respectful discourse is necessary in all circumstances, but it is absolutely essential when the dialogue is between shared Christians, when Christians are talking together. In his letter to the Galatians, Paul writes to a church. Let's see, there we go. In his letter to the Galatians, Paul writes to a church consumed by religious argument and conflict. And his words to the church are relevant not just to religious, but to political discussions. He writes, for the entire law is fulfilled in keeping this one command. Love your neighbor as yourself. If you bite and devour each other, watch out, or you will be destroyed by each other. When Christians start arguing and fighting about politics, they've ignored the fundamental value of love. Okay, I have one more helpful guide: knowledge over ignorance. Christians are to speak with credibility. They must be an informed constituency. That is, and there's a reason for this, because democracy requires an informed voting public, and Christians must pay special attention to that requirement. Maybe you've heard these words from the book of Proverbs. The discerning heart speaks knowledge. The mouth of a fool feeds on folly. To claim the authority to speak and then not have the knowledge to speak in a credible manner is to be considered foolish. We as Christians, to the best of our abilities, must work hard to understand the various perspectives on the issues of the day so that we will be able to reflect on those issues intelligently and biblically. Do you know who this man is? This is Daniel Patrick Moynihan. Daniel Patrick Moynihan was a college professor and politician who was admired on both sides of the political aisle. He looks a little like a cartoon character to me, but he was an amazing man. Moynihan was selected by Richard Nixon to be the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, and then later he was elected to be the Democratic senator from New York. One of his most well-known sayings was, everyone is entitled to his own opinion, but not his own facts. I agree with that. I appreciate the fact that he said it. The problem is, in today's distinctly partisan political environment, it is often hard to know what the facts are. The presence of the internet and advocacy media has made it difficult for the facts to get through. The electorate, you see, is not only split into distinct political parties, it's split into separate information bubbles. that operate as echo chambers, only allowing a certain perspective to be disseminated. Now, I know the appeal of that. We all know the appeal of regularly listening to voices that confirm and elevate the particular religious or political point of view we agree with. I like that. It can be calming, even restorative in troubled times. Yet if that continues, we got problems. If we as citizens continue to live and operate and remain within our own distinctive information bubbles, then we will never really get all the facts. Not only will our particular political ideas and perspectives never be tested, we will never really have the opportunity to learn. For learning means being challenged to think differently. There is a solution to this, an alternative to the current phenomenon of political echo chambers. It involves making a deliberate effort to hear a different point of view. It means tuning to different channels or going to different websites, not for the purpose of securing ammunition so we can effectively overpower our opponents. Rather, we tune in and we read so we can better understand different points of view and adjust our own views accordingly. My opinion, one of the most sympathetic characters in the gospel story is the man named Nicodemus. Remember, we read this about him? Now, there was a Pharisee, a man named Nicodemus, who was a member of the Jewish ruling council. He came to Jesus at night. Nicodemus was a Pharisee, a member of the Sanhedrin, and he went to talk to Jesus at night because he feared criticism from his religious colleagues. Yet, he was still willing to listen to this rabbi who offered a distinctly different perspective on the kingdom of God. Nicodemus deliberately walked outside his own echo chamber, and therefore his life was changed. His example can guide us, not just in politics, but in life. And so we want to conclude this class on faith and politics with two foundational principles. And these principles, I hope, will guide us in all of our political decisions and choices. The first foundational principle is this: reject the politics of selfishness. I know it's not uncommon today for people to vote according to their own self-interest. While we may say we seek the best for our country, we in truth are often driven primarily for just what's best for me. Whether it's healthcare or tax policy or immigration strategy or a host of other issues, the bottom line is all too frequently determined by what brings me the highest level of material gain and the least disruption of personal comfort. Both sides of the political spectrum are driven to placate our selfish desires. Liberals keep telling us how certain government programs can expand our material well-being and serve our own self-interest. This is what you need to make your life better. Conservatives assert that they will keep government out of our lives so we can keep living the way we want to. Both are feeding our desire to get what we want or live as we prefer. An example of this kind of selfish motivation became a defining moment in the presidential election of 1992. Do you remember those candidates? They're kind of standing together. The candidates in 1992 that year were Bill Clinton, George H.W. Bush, and Ross Perot of the Independent Party. And they were participating in a town hall question and answer meeting in New England. At that town hall meeting, a young man stood up and offered the following question. I'm 21 years old. This year will be the first time I get to vote in a presidential election. What I want to know is what each of you would do for me should either of you be elected. Well, unfortunately, in an attempt to respond to that young man's question, all three candidates seem to compete with each other, trying to articulate all the gifts and benefits their administration would bring, not just to that young man, but to all young voters. Truthfully, it was a dramatic pivot from John F. Kennedy's call to the nation in his 1961 inaugural address. You remember that quote, "Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country." Things have changed since then. I know that appealing to selfish motives is common in all political campaigns, but the question of self-interest is clearly a motivating factor determining how many people vote. Yet those who follow Jesus ought to be motivated by different concerns. In this series, we've affirmed that there are higher values that guide our political choices, and we've referred to two passages from Scripture that continually reflect those choices, that continue to have deep relevance for us today. First, from the Old Testament, what does the Lord require of you? To act justly and to love mercy, to walk humbly with your God. And the second, from the New Testament, the words of Jesus, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. The call to pursue justice and demonstrate mercy is a call to act outside of our own self-interest. Therefore, a demonstrated concern for the least of these must become part of our political agenda. The well-known preacher and author David Platt recently published a book entitled Before You Vote. And in that book, Platt offers you see the subtitle, he offers 7 questions Christians should ask before they vote. One of those questions is, what does my neighbor need? The question is not, what do I need? Or what do people like me need? Or what do people need in order for them to become more like me? No, the question we need to ask before we vote is fundamentally other-centered. What does my neighbor need? A Samaritan walking along the road between Jericho and Jerusalem encountered that very question and answered it correctly. In considering how or for whom we will vote, we need to seek candidates who will call us to higher ideals, those who would inspire us to live generously rather than selfishly. For you see, when we reject the self-centered perspective, we start looking at freedom differently. Freedom from the self-centered point of view is the right to do whatever we want. Freedom that is other-centered is liberation from the forces that ensnare and entrap us, that keep people from living with the full level of dignity that God intended. This means that we will evaluate candidates not just in terms of what they can do for us, but also according to what they can offer each and every American in terms of opportunity, dignity, and hope. And now, fundamental principle number 2, we need to commit ourselves, we need to demonstrate authority instead of pursuing power. Let me describe what I'm talking about. And we talked about this in one of our earlier classes. I want to introduce this by repeating what we've said before. Christians often delude themselves into thinking that the values of Jesus can become more dominant in our culture if we just properly use political power. We need to get more power. Christians on both sides of the political spectrum see power as the primary instrument for saving the world. If we just had the power, we could set everything right. But the problem is the word Jesus. For you see, instead of encouraging us to embrace power, Jesus warned against it. You know his words. The kings of the Gentiles lord it over them, and those who exercise authority over them call themselves benefactors. But you are not to be like that. Instead, the greatest among you should be like the youngest, and the one who rules like the one who serves. Instead of using power to mold public policy, we should endeavor to speak as Christians. We should endeavor as Christians to speak with authority when we engage politically. Let me just expand on that. There's the sociologist, picture of the sociologist Max Weber. He lived about a century ago, you can tell. He made a differentiation between power and authority. According to Max Weber, power entails the ability to coerce or impose your will on others. That's power. He defined authority as having the legitimate right in the eyes of others to expect that proposals will be embraced and followed. For example, if you are followed because others have no choice, you have power. If you are followed because others believe you have a legitimate claim to their allegiance, you have authority. Jesus was one who spoke with authority. His authority came not just from how he spoke, but from who he was and how he lived. In fact, he deliberately rejected the coercion of power and said this: "For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, to give his life as a ransom for many." Jesus' sacrifice at Calvary confirmed his authority. Because of that authority, every knee will bow and every tongue will confess allegiance to him. Jesus did not coerce others to follow him. His authority came through the sacrifice of his life. On June 9th, 1982, Mother Teresa spoke at the Harvard University graduation. Travis Holland over here was only 2 years old. And you remember that, don't you, Travis?
He wasn't even 2.
No.
He wasn't even 2.
Oh, he wasn't even 2. Okay. Mother Teresa was not the first choice of Harvard senior class. She was invited only after both Alan Alda and Sandra Day O'Connor had rejected that invitation. But she came and she spoke, and her words were both courageous and controversial in that Harvard academic setting. These are some of what she said. Go into the world with Jesus, to work for Jesus, to serve in the distressing guides of the poor. She said, "It is something unbelievable today that a mother herself murders her own child, afraid of having to feed one more child, afraid to educate even one more child. That is one of the greatest poverties. A nation, people, family that allows that, they are the poorest, the poor." She is not restrained in what she says. She says, virginity is the most beautiful thing. Can you believe she said this to these Harvard graduates? Virginity is the most beautiful thing a young man and a young woman can give each other. Make a resolution that on your wedding day, you can give each other something beautiful. If a mistake has been made, have the courage to accept the child. Do not destroy it. That sin is murder. Students of Harvard not only sat in rapt attention. They gave Mother Teresa a standing ovation. That is because when she spoke as one having authority. She got that authority on the streets of Calcutta, ministering to the sick and to the dying, no matter their political views or moral perspective. All those present listened to Mother Teresa with respect because her service and sacrifice among the poorest of the poor enabled her to speak with authority. We as Christians used to be the majority in our own country. We exercised a sort of majority rule. Our values were the predominant ones, and there was a time when the culture, by and large, reflected much of what we believe. All of that has now changed, for we are now in the minority. We see much of what we advocate for no longer being sanctioned in society. We can no longer influence the culture through the power of our majority status. So how do we influence them? Well, this new path of influence is articulated by Jesus in his Sermon on the Mount, when he calls us salt and light. You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Let your light shine before others, so they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. The early Christians listened to Jesus, and they put his words into practice, and thus they impacted the world in which they live. And in the second generation of Christianity, Peter will write this: live such good lives among the pagans, that though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day he visits us. Christians can speak the truth in the area of power politics without playing power games. For you see, as we engage and speak to the political arena, we must carry with us a track record of service and concern for the least of these in need. And when that happens, when we speak, we will speak as people with authority, and the influence we will in our society will be the most authentic kind. Thank you for listening.